Did you know that in a recent survey, 44% of individuals aged 18 to 49 said that they're not likely to have kids? Now just think about that for a second. That's almost half of our generation choosing not to become parents. And of course there are reasons for this, which is what I'm going to get to in this video. But before we get into that, let's ask ourselves one question, as stupid as this question may sound, which is, what is the purpose of having kids in the first place? Well, say you were brought into this planet where civilization wasn't as developed as we see it today. You may argue that it was to try and figure out what this life was about, and how and why humans were put onto this planet in the first place. And as the generations progressed, the newer generations can come closer to the quote-unquote truth. And some would say that the purpose of having kids was for survival, especially in the 1800s, where it was in your best interest to put your children into labor and have them working in a factory, for instance. Now, living in the postmodern era, traditional values don't hold as much value, and having kids is more so left up for the individual to decide, which isn't inherently a good or a bad thing. Because me personally, I'm all about pro-choice and having the ability and the free will to choose how you want to live your life. But now I want to bring back the question, which is, what is actually the purpose of having kids in the postmodern era? And if you ask most people, they would say that having kids is just what you do, or having kids will make you happy. Which, me personally, I don't actually agree with either of those statements, and I'll get into the reasons as to why later in the video. And a lot of people would like to think that it's their own decision as to whether they would actually like to have kids or not. But throughout history, we can see that the decision as to whether someone wants kids or not has heavily been influenced by social, economic, and ethical factors. So now I actually want to bring back the question, which is, does having children actually make you happy? And I've sort of had this debate with my mum for the longest time, where I would just bring up the fact that, what if you just didn't want to have kids? And the conversation will always steer in a particular direction, where she would mention that you would actually miss out on a lot of the happiness in life. And to that question in particular, I really just want to ask, is that really true? Because doesn't true happiness come from the contentment within yourself, rather than something which is external? And don't get it twisted, this isn't me saying that there's a problem with having kids. It's actually far from the truth. I'm also worried about the psychology and the expectations a lot of people have when they do decide to have children. And this idea that having kids would bring forth this surge of happiness is honestly quite selfish and flawed by design. Because this is a seductive lie that parenting will fulfill you in ways which can't be done otherwise. It just blinds a lot of people on the realities of actually having children. Because, I'm gonna be honest, parenting is hard. You could say that my opinion might not hold as much weight, but I've had a lot of conversations with the people who are parents. And sure, there is research that shows that there is a quote-unquote happiness bump just moments after the baby is born. But that quickly withers away after a couple of years or so. This is also not to mention the fact that no one talks about the loss of freedom, the sleep deprivation that you probably have to go through when you put your kid back to sleep in the middle of the night, the stress, the boredom, and the dissatisfaction that not all parents, but some parents secretly feel deep down inside when raising a child isn't all it's cracked out to be. And I feel for millennials, man, who are supposed to be the next upcoming generation of parents. And millennials were a generation taught by boomers to work hard, get a good job, and climb that corporate ladder. And I do understand where these boomers are coming from, as they probably never had the chance to, say, go to university and get that dream high-paying job as they see their other peers working in. The only issue is that these millennials came out of school or college during the 2008 financial recession, which essentially screwed everything over. And if you look around, a lot of millennials are just simply not able to afford a house, which is ideally where you would want to raise a child, right? And we also can't forget the fact that it was actually very difficult to find and get a job at the time which was high paying. And for some reason, the millennials get the fingers pointed at them by these old boomers, bro, who are completely ignorant as to just realizing how expensive the economy has gotten, which is arguably one of the main contributing factors as to the reasons as to why many people aren't having kids. On the other side of the equation, we have Gen Zs, which is including myself, who saw this coming a mile away, and now it's ingrained in our subconscious mind to not try as much, as we see how rigged everything really is. Gen Zs also have a serious stimulant problem, which is actually one of the main reasons as to why many people just can't take a second away without just scrolling on their phones. And it's also one of the main reasons as to why we feel a lot more disconnected than ever, when on paper we should be a lot more connected. So as you can imagine, from both the Gen Zs and the millennials, we face these unique mental health challenges, from a rise in depression, anxiety, and stress from all the uncertainty. And to be honest, a lot of us are just trying to figure things out and prioritizing our own mental well-being, and just the thought of bringing another kid into that just complicate things a lot further. And what I'm describing here is the product of capitalism. And our generation really started to catch up on this, as this individualistic nature of living has its compromises. which if you look a little bit closer, you realize how atomized our lives have gotten, and we have to rely on ourselves for our physical and spiritual needs. Because the very idea of capitalism is that you work and you work past your limits, whilst disregarding yourself as an individual, your social life and your relationships, all for increasing profits for a company that you probably don't really care about, or for a salary to keep you afloat. And now mix all of that in whilst trying to fulfill the social demands of trying to become a full-time parent. Bro, it's just too much. And the funny thing is, these hardcore capitalists do care about declining birth rates, as the majority of economic growth has been heavily reliant upon population growth since the inception of time. It's just ironic to me because the very system of capitalism, which encouraged families to have children to keep up with the demands of labor, is the very thing which is going to slow it down. And we can argue that women especially have seen the biggest rise in individualism and autonomy throughout these years. And one of the reasons are the fact that women have access to education and employment opportunities that they simply didn't have just 100 years ago. Another reason would be due to the rise in online dating apps and having access to methods of contraception, which allows a woman to push bearing a child and having this feeling of, okay, I can delay this. We also live in a culture where motherhood is almost shunned in a way, and if a woman does decide to become a mother, it's almost seen as quote-unquote settling. And of course, this is a counterculture to the patriarchal expectations which were most definitely prevalent around 100 years ago, with the woman having to quote-unquote stay in the kitchen. You can see this ideology in the movies and the media especially, where women feel like for the first time have this feeling of independence without having to depend on another man or a traditional family. This gives rise to a particular philosophy which has gained in popularity recently, which is this idea of anti-natalism. So this is a philosophical belief that humans should actually abstain from procreating, as they see the negative and immoral aspects of bringing another child into this world outweighing the benefits. And we can also argue that no one actually gave consent to being born, as, let's be honest, a lot of life is a bit of a scam and we're all going to pass away anyways, right? And parents both subconsciously and consciously pass on their set of beliefs and biases to the kid at an age where the kid isn't mature enough to exert its own free will. So the question is, how can we truly achieve freedom and independence if a lot of our lives are scripted at birth? So now I want to bring the question back to you. Should you have kids? I mean, throughout the video, you may be feeling some type of way, as it may feel like I'm talking down on having kids, but that's actually not the case at all. I just like to take a more logical approach on having kids and having a general understanding around the topic. I mean, at the end of the day, it should be a personal decision, but like I mentioned earlier, you should do it for the right reasons and not because of some family or societal pressure. Remember, you've got control of your life. And the thing is, you'd most definitely start to value different things at different stages of your life. And you may come to the realization yourself that having a family and kids is actually one of the more fulfilling goals to go after once you enter adulthood. Because most people, guys especially, can see the benefit of working to support a family rather than engaging in hedonistic activities. This gives the individual a unique opportunity to build memories through the lives of the children as they grow up and experience the same levels of joy as you felt when you were younger. And as those grey hairs start coming in and you truly start to get older, you'd most definitely start to value human connection more and more, and building a family from the ground up, especially in the latter half of your life, would make your life so much more fulfilling. And those kids you decided to bring into this world would be the ones to carry on your legacy.